Hi, I'm Riley. My parents called an emergency family meeting. I thought someone was sick. Instead, they handed me a $190,000 invoice for raising me. My dad looked me in the eye and said, "You owe us for the life we gave you." And I just nodded. But behind that nod was something they didn't know. Proof they'd stolen every cent of my inheritance. The moment I slid that folder across the table, they went pale. But that wasn't the part that broke me. It was realizing they always saw me as a bill, not a daughter. Before we dive in, where are you watching from? Morning coffee? Late night walk? Drop it in the comments. We're about to uncover a family secret they tried to bury for good. They called it a family emergency. That's what the voicemail said. It was just after 7 a.m. on a Sunday when the call came in. Valora's voice, firm and clipped. "Riley, you need to come over. It's urgent. It's about the family." No mention of what kind of emergency. No detail. And that's what made my chest tighten as I grabbed my coat. Because when Valora said, "the family," she never meant all of us. She meant control. She meant something was about to shift, and I was expected to play along. I drove the short route to their house in silence, half expecting an ambulance in the driveway. Maybe my father slumped over the porch swing. But when I pulled up, the only thing waiting was that too-perfect mailbox Valora repainted every spring like clockwork. The house looked normal. Too normal. The kind of normal that makes your stomach twist before your brain can catch up. The front door opened before I could knock. "Come in," Valora said, stepping back like a hostess at a church tea. Her lipstick was fresh, not a strand of her gray bun out of place. I scanned the living room, then the hallway. No signs of distress, no noise from the TV, no coffee brewing. Just stillness. Everett was already sitting at the dining room table, back straight, his thick glasses catching the early light. He didn't say a word, just nodded, almost apologetically, like he knew what was coming but didn't have the spine to stop it. "Sit down," Valora said. "We'll make this brief." That phrase. Like she was handing me a bill after a dentist cleaning. I sat at the long oak table where we'd carved pumpkins every October as kids, where Valora once laid out her infamous potluck spreadsheet like a military map, and now, laid before me, was a manila envelope. Valora slid it toward me with both hands. Her nails were neatly painted mauve. I noticed details when I was anxious, something about grounding myself in the small things. "What's this?" I asked, my voice lower than I expected. Dry. She smiled like it was nothing. "Open it." Inside, neatly printed on crisp white paper, was an invoice. A real one, itemized, labeled, "Reimbursement for Parental Investment, Riley W." I blinked. At first I thought it was a joke, a badly timed, poorly delivered joke. Until I read the first line. Formula and baby supplies, 1989-1991, $3,400 electricity, water used, childhood estimate, $7,180 transportation to and from school, K-12, $18,000 family cell phone plan coverage, 2004-2010, $1,260 carpool mileage, science fair and chess tournaments, $200 college application fees, non-refundable, $480 emotional labor, unquantifiable, approximated, $10,000, it went on, down to the cent. I looked up. "You're serious?" Valora folded her hands like a school principal. "You've done well for yourself, Riley. You're making good money. It's only fair to give back." Everett cleared his throat but still didn't look at me directly. "We gave you a strong start. We just think it's time to balance the scales." Balance the scales. I stared at that line item for the chess tournaments. I remembered those tournaments. I remembered sitting alone in the cafeteria afterward while the other kids' parents hugged them. Valora hadn't come. Not once. But I guess now I owed her gas money for the few times she arranged a neighbor to drive me. "How much do you want?" I asked quietly. Valora nodded at the last page. "Total is $190,118.73, but we're not unreasonable. You can do a payment plan." "A payment plan," I laughed, just one exhale. No joy in it. I ran my fingers over the edge of the paper. You kept this documented? All these years? She didn't flinch. We believe in accountability. That's how families stay strong. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't cry. I wouldn't give her that. Not here. Not like this. I folded the papers carefully and placed them back in the envelope. My fingers shook slightly, not from fear, but from restraint. Then I looked Valora in the eye. When, I asked, did I stop being your daughter and become a bill? The silence was heavy. Even Everett finally shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but Valora just pressed her lips together and said, "It's not personal." Not personal. I reached into my purse slowly. I could feel it, smooth, thin, tucked into the side pocket where I kept things I never wanted to lose. I pulled it out, but I didn't place it on the table. Not yet. Because if Valora thought this was business, fine. I'd show her what real business looked like. I didn't put the envelope down right away. Instead, I sat there, letting the silence tighten around us like an overwrapped bandage. My fingers brushed the edges of the 3 documents inside my purse. They were slightly worn from being handled too many times, by lawyers, notaries, by me, late at night, just staring at them. Finally, I pulled them out. No rush, just deliberate calm. 3 crisp, folded pages. Heavy stock. Not photocopies, not fakes. Certified originals. I placed them neatly on the table, aligned them like I used to do with my audit forms at work. Valora flinched, just slightly. Everett's fingers tightened around the armrest of his chair. I looked directly at them and spoke evenly. "Grandpa didn't just leave me money," I said. "He left me the land, the old rental units, and every last piece of art in his collection." Neither of them moved. He told me once when I was a teenager, "You're the only one who sees me, not my checkbook." I thought it was just a sweet old man thing to say. Turns out it was a statement of intent. Valora's mouth twitched. "What are you talking about?" "You both signed as executors," I said. "Your names are right there. You handled the estate. And yet, the accounts never reached me." Everett shifted, rubbing his chin like he could erase the truth with friction. I didn't raise my voice. No theatrics, just facts. I used to think maybe he didn't leave much. Maybe there were debts. But then last year, I found something in the attic. Their eyes met briefly. That was my confirmation. I kept going. There was a box tucked behind the old camping gear. It wasn't locked, just dusty. And inside was this. I tapped the stack of documents, and a letter, sealed, with Grandpa's handwriting. I didn't need to pull it out now. The weight of the will was doing enough. "I was 11 when he died," I said softly, "but I still remember how he'd hum when he made tea, how he always called me by name, never girl or child. He said I reminded him of Aunt Liza, his sister, the one who fought off a foreclosure notice at 22. Everett's expression cracked at that. He looked down at his lap like he wished he could disappear into it. "I read the letter he left," I said. "It talked about me. Not as a backup, not as a footnote, as his heir, because I showed up every weekend that last year while you both were out busy." Valora scoffed. "Busy raising you." I stared at her. She doubled down. "You were always distant, Riley. Cold. Not like Jasper. He had heart. He stayed close." "He also once tried to feed Grandpa's diabetic dog a glazed donut," I said. "But sure, let's call that heart." I leaned back. Let the quiet stew for a minute. "I paid off the mortgage on the duplex 2 years ago," I said calmly. "The one you two sold behind my back. Title was still in Grandpa's name when he passed. That property should have been mine, but somehow it vanished." Everett finally looked up. His lips parted, then closed again, then opened. "You were never supposed to find that," he said hoarsely. And there it was. The air shifted. Even the walls felt like they leaned in to listen. Valora snapped, "Enough of this. You're making things up. You don't know what it cost us to keep this family together. You have no idea what it's like to struggle." I raised an eyebrow. "Valora, I lived in a studio apartment with mold behind the fridge for 5 years while you two vacationed in Sedona every February. That's not fair. Neither is a $190,000 invoice for my childhood, I said, my voice steel under velvet. But here we are. I picked up one of the folded pages, slid it closer to Everett. This one signed by the county clerk, confirming receipt of the will, dated 3 days after Grandpa passed, and your names are right there. You processed the estate. You knew. Valora reached out, but Everett caught her wrist. For the first time, she looked genuinely unsettled. Not performative, not righteous, just rattled. You used to tell me I was dramatic, I murmured. Maybe I am. But drama doesn't lie. Paper trails don't lie. No one spoke. Even the clock in the hallway seemed quieter than before. I rose slowly from my seat, gathered the pages back into my purse one by one, deliberate, calm. I came here because you said it was a family emergency, I said. Turns out it was, just not the kind you expected. I slung my purse over my shoulder, took one step toward the hallway. Behind me, Everett spoke again. You were never supposed to find that. I turned just enough to meet his eyes. That's the thing about truth, I said. It tends to wait, quietly, until someone opens a box in the attic. I didn't respond right away. I just stood there, staring out the kitchen window. His whisper hung in the air like a stain. I didn't move, didn't blink. Then I turned, slow and quiet, and walked past both of them. My feet carried me toward the back door like they knew something I hadn't caught up to yet. The screen door creaked behind me as I stepped out onto the porch. Morning light had fully broken now, but it felt like the world had dimmed. The air was cool, almost damp, and the sky sat heavy overhead, like it knew too much. I crossed the porch, walked down the steps barefoot, and felt the grain of the weathered boards under my heel. I needed air. In my coat pocket, I found the envelope. My fingers found it without looking. Creases worn from how many times I'd pulled it out, stared at it, folded it back. This wasn't from this morning. This one had followed me for years. The seal was already broken. I slid the letter halfway out and let my eyes rest on the bold heading at the top. Statement of Executor Review, Estate of Howard K. Allenton. It was dated 3 years after his passing. That was the year I walked into Mr. Donnelly's downtown office with questions that had haunted me since the funeral. He hadn't seemed surprised to see me. I remember sitting there, holding a hot cup of tea I didn't drink, while he closed his office door and said, "Riley, I was hoping you'd come." He had paused as if what he was about to say might bruise me. "There's something you should know. Your name was removed from the inheritance paperwork 8 weeks after Howard passed. Your parents submitted a power of attorney on your behalf." I had blinked. "I didn't sign anything." He hesitated. "They claimed you did, while you were in grief, at the hospital." I remembered the nurse bringing me forms, Valora whispering to her, hand brushing her arm. "Just have her sign. She's tired. She won't read." I had trusted that woman. I'd trusted both of them. Back then, I hadn't thought to question the signature. But I did, 2 years later, when I finally requested the documents. What stared back at me was my name, curled wrong. The tail on the Y wasn't mine. The spacing was off. It was close, but it wasn't mine. "You were grieving," Mr. Donnelly had said gently. "They used that moment. And they'd taken everything." Behind me, the porch creaked again. I didn't turn. Everett's footsteps were slow, hesitant. I could hear him clear his throat, but he didn't speak until he was standing a few paces away, just past the old bird feeder. "We did what was best for the family." I kept my back to him. My hands tightened around the envelope. "You mean best for Jasper?" I said, finally turning. He didn't flinch, but something in his face sagged, as if someone had cut the strings holding him upright. "That money wouldn't have changed you," he said, "but it gave your brother a fresh start. He needed it." I laughed, and it came out sharp. "You think I didn't?" "You were always strong," he said. "Tough, smart. You'd be okay no matter what. That wasn't your decision to make. His eyes dropped to the ground. You were gone so long, moved across the country, rarely came back. Because every time I did, I felt like a stranger in my own bloodline. My voice rose, steady but cold. I stayed in that hospital room with Grandpa until the moment he passed. I read to him, wiped his face. You two showed up when it was over and walked out with everything. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. How much? I asked, quieter now. How much did Jasper get? He stared past me. I waited. Finally, his voice dropped, barely above a whisper. All of it. 2.1 million. He doesn't know the full story. We didn't tell him. I felt the wind pick up just slightly, brushing the hem of my coat. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen was still lit. Quietly, without looking at him, I tapped the red button on the recorder app. The little file saved instantly. He didn't seem to notice. I suppose you think that's enough, I said, voice even. That giving it to him made you a good father, or at least, better than nothing. He looked like he wanted to say yes, but the words wouldn't come. I tapped save on the voice recording, then turned to face the man who sold me out for silence. The backyard air had cooled, but inside the house, the temperature was about to shift in a very different way. Valora's voice floated through the open patio door like syrup over a poisoned knife. Riley, darling, we're ready when you are. I walked back in, the gravel crunching beneath my shoes, feeling louder than it should have. Inside, the midday light filtered through the bay window, casting soft gold on the expensive rug they never let us kids walk on barefoot. Now suddenly, I was welcome to sit. Everyone was seated in a stiff circle again, like nothing had happened. Jasper had taken the head seat, legs spread, thumbs hooked into his belt loops like a man born to inherit. Aunt Corinne sat near the edge, quiet and careful, like someone invited to keep up appearances but told not to speak unless asked. Mr. Hendricks, the family accountant, sat with a leather folder resting calmly on his knee. He nodded at me as I returned, not kindly, just formally. I didn't sit right away. Valora gestured at the chair across from her, that thin smile still on her face. Come now, let's be civil. There's no need for drama. That word again, civil. In this house, civil meant hush up and obey. I sat. Mr. Hendricks reached into his folder and placed a long envelope on the glass coffee table. It made a small tap, but to me it sounded like a gavel. We wanted to clarify expectations going forward, Valora began, folding her hands gently like she was praying. Your father and I feel that now's the time to settle old accounts before any future assets are distributed. I blinked. Future assets? Jasper leaned forward with a smirk. Yeah. Assuming you still want to be considered for anything. Mr. Hendricks slid the envelope toward me. Inside, you'll find a breakdown. A reconciliation statement, if you will, standard practice in complex estates. It's itemized. I opened it. 12 pages, neatly printed, year by year. Every column had a heading. Housing, nutrition, medical, education, even emotional support had a dollar figure next to it. It totaled $190,348.65. At the top, one phrase was bolded, reimbursement for upbringing. I stared at the words, then flipped to a random page. Age 6, speech therapy sessions, $220. Age 10, appendectomy, private hospital, $11,870. Age 12, summer ballet intensive, $2,000. And beneath it, in italics, unreciprocated birthday acknowledgement, cake plus venue rental, $560. I looked up slowly. Valora's voice turned soft, almost motherly. We gave you everything, Riley, and then you just disappeared. No calls, no visits, nothing. So we had to account for your part before moving ahead with final distributions. You billed me, I said, my voice dry, for surviving emergency surgery. Everett finally spoke, his voice as even as a spreadsheet. It was a private hospital. You didn't thank us. I pressed my fingers against my temples. This is insane. Jasper leaned back, arms folded. It's fair. You left. You haven't contributed to the family in years. Why should you get a share of anything now? Because I earned it, I snapped. Valora tisked softly. Honey, let's not escalate. These are just numbers. Truth is, we didn't have to show you this at all, but we thought it'd be more transparent this way. Transparent. Like the lies weren't thick as smoke. I took a deep breath and reached into my coat pocket. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled out a flash drive and placed it on the table. It clicked gently against the glass, so small compared to their folder, but heavier than all of it. What's that? Jasper frowned. I didn't answer right away. I looked at Mr. Hendricks. Back when Grandpa was sick, I helped him digitize all his records. Taxes, donations, investments, even gifts to family. He made me scan every scrap of paper. I still have it all, including receipts for the trust fund he set aside, the one you said didn't exist. Jasper's face twitched. I turned to Mr. Hendricks. Might want to take a look. I think you'll find some discrepancies between what's in that envelope and what Grandpa actually left behind. Everett shifted uncomfortably. Valora's voice dropped a notch. Riley, you wouldn't turn this into some kind of scene, would you? You know how Jasper gets when he's— Don't, I said sharply. Jasper stood. You think this is some kind of game? I looked him dead in the eye. No, I think it's about to get very real. I didn't sit back down. I stayed standing beside the table, arms crossed loosely, as Mr. Hendricks hesitated with the USB. His fingers hovered over the trackpad like they were trembling from caffeine, not guilt. The room was so quiet, you could hear the faint tick of the antique clock Valora had insisted added class to the mantel. He finally clicked. A list of folders appeared on the laptop screen, neat, clear, and time-stamped. I saw him flinch slightly at the number of files. His glasses slid down his nose as he leaned forward. Start with that one, I said, pointing. He opened a folder labeled March 2017. Inside, letters, ledger scans, an audio file. That last one had their names stamped right across it. Valora, March 2017. He double-clicked it. At first, only silence. Then her voice, my mother's, filled the room. High-pitched, trying to sound casual, but there was strain under it. So you're sure there's no way she'd find out? Because what I need is something quiet, something that just shifts it over. She's out there with her own life, she won't notice. Riley doesn't care about these things. Then came the steady voice of my grandfather. Calm, disapproving. Valora, moving assets from one beneficiary to another without disclosure is theft, plain and simple. A breath, her voice again, lower now. I'm not stealing. I'm just protecting Jasper's future. Mr. Hendricks looked like he'd aged 5 years in 2 minutes. He fumbled for the pause key. Everett leaned across him. Turn that off, my father ordered. I reached over, slowly, deliberately, and touched his wrist just enough to stop him. Let it finish. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The recording kept playing. Grandpa's voice now firmer. You already talked me into revising the trust once. I won't do it again. And if you try without me, Valora, that's on you. Then the click of the recorder shutting off. Silence again. Aunt Corinne blinked slowly, the kind of blink that says, I always wondered. Her gaze drifted to Valora, then back to Mr. Hendricks. He was still staring at the screen like it might start explaining itself. I wasn't shown this, he muttered. During probate, I didn't see any of these files. I pulled a document from my bag. Crisp. Clean. The paper still had the faint scent of storage, dry, old, and untouched. That's because they weren't in your records, I said calmly. They were locked in Grandpa's safety deposit box. This one came to me 2 weeks ago, mailed directly from his attorney in Boise. He didn't trust anyone else to handle it. I laid it on the table in front of Mr. Hendricks. He adjusted his glasses, picked it up, and started reading aloud just under his breath. Addendum to Last Will and Testament, assignment of mineral rights, investment accounts to Riley Rayner. He blinked. This is notarized. Valora shot up from her seat like the chair had burned her. That's fake. I looked her in the eye. Yours was. She opened her mouth to protest, but nothing came out. Jasper, who had been silent this whole time, suddenly lunged. Not at me. At the table. He snatched for the document, but I had already stepped back. He caught air. "You try that again," I said flatly, "and the next person you'll be dealing with isn't me. It's the county clerk, the one who certified that exact paper last week." He froze mid-breath. "And just so we're clear," I added, pulling out my phone, "this whole conversation's been recorded too? For clarity." The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was dangerous. It crackled with years of buried rot surfacing. Aunt Corinne cleared her throat. Her voice was unsteady, but she spoke with more weight than I'd ever heard from her before. "If what you're saying is true," she said slowly, "then you both," she turned to Valora and Everett, "committed felony fraud." Mr. Hendricks sank a little into his seat. That's not just an error," he whispered. "That's criminal." Everett backed away from the table, his eyes darting toward the fireplace like it might offer some kind of escape. Valora didn't move. She just stood there, lips parted, her hands slowly curling into fists. "You said she'd never find out," she hissed. "Not to me. To Jasper." His face twitched. I could see it now. She wasn't angry about what they'd done. She was angry they didn't cover it well enough. I walked over to the doorway and picked up the second envelope from my bag, tucked it under my arm. They followed every movement I made. "Oh, I found out a lot," I said over my shoulder, "but I haven't even shown you what's in the second envelope yet." The room was still, too still, like that eerie calm right before a summer thunderstorm cracks the sky. My fingers brushed the corner of the second envelope as I slid it from my coat pocket, quietly, deliberately. I didn't rush. Let them sit in their own silence a little longer. Valora's eyes narrowed. "Another letter from your dead grandfather?" Her tone had that same mockery I'd heard all my life, thinly veiled under forced sweetness, the kind used when someone's losing control. I didn't look at her. I just broke the seal, pulled out the folded paper, and laid it flat on the coffee table where everyone could see. It wasn't a letter. It was an invoice. Mr. Hendricks squinted down at the header, then went rigid. "Notice of intended civil action," he read aloud under his breath. Valora blinked. "What is that?" I didn't sit down this time. I stood, one hand resting lightly on the back of the chair, the other flipping the page. "You billed me $190,000 to cover costs of raising me. Remember that?" I asked, my voice quiet, measured. "So I figured, fair's fair." Jasper frowned. Everett shifted, jaw tight. I tapped the first line with my finger. $60,000 for the unauthorized transfer of trust funds yanked from Grandpa's account without consent. Valora looked at Everett, but I didn't pause. $29,000 fake legal representation fees drafted through a third cousin you claimed was an estate lawyer. He isn't, and he never filed those documents. I flipped to the second page. $101,000, that includes compound interest, and what the state labels as emotional damages from intentional financial deception and fraudulent inheritance interference. Aunt Corinne made a noise, low, guttural. "Oh my Lord." Valora finally found her voice. It was brittle, thin. You can't sue your own family for this." I met her stare, flat and unwavering. "You're right. I couldn't, until you made it a financial transaction. You sent a bill. I'm simply replying in kind." Everett stood now, angry color rising in his face. "You think you're gonna drag this family name through court? After all we've done for you?" I leaned in just slightly, my voice calm. "I don't need to drag anything, Dad. You'll settle. Privately. Just like the neighbors did when you forged their deed in 2021. The color drained from Everett's face like water down a sink. Valora's hands clenched. "That's not true. You want me to play that tape too?" I asked. Mr. Hendricks looked up, startled. "There's a tape?" "There's more than one." Aunt Corinne turned sharply. "Wait, What deed? What are you talking about? I pulled the final sheet from the envelope, folded in half. I placed it gently in front of her, then stepped back. A letter from the State Property and Ethics Board. An investigator opened a case after I forwarded them scanned copies of your amended will, along with bank records Grandpa's lawyer kept. They're combing through your finances now, and Jasper's. Valora sat down hard, like her knees had finally given out. She didn't speak, didn't move. Jasper just stared at me, not with anger, but like someone trying and failing to figure out how the ground shifted under them. You think this makes you better than us? Everett snapped. No, I replied. It just makes me free from you. Valora's voice broke. We did everything, so Jasper wouldn't feel left out. You were always strong, Riley. You never needed— Don't do that, I said, sharper now. Don't repackage theft as some noble sacrifice. You didn't do it for Jasper. You did it because you thought I'd stay quiet. I turned to Jasper. He flinched slightly. You still want to be executor? I asked him plainly. He didn't answer. Mr. Hendricks cleared his throat, trembling slightly. I want no part of this. I'll recuse myself and notify the bar. I should have done more due diligence when I handled the probate. I'm deeply sorry. Aunt Corinne looked between all of us, lips pressed so tight they went white. I stepped around the table, heading toward the door. My hand brushed the doorknob. Then I stopped. I turned halfway, not for dramatic effect, but because I meant every word that came next. You said I owed you for the life you gave me, I said, quiet and clear. But you stole the only thing I ever asked for. Not money, not favor, just truth. And with that, I opened the door. The next morning came soft and gray. I didn't rush. I woke with a quiet clarity that didn't need coffee to sharpen it. Still, I made some anyway, bitter, dark, fitting. I dressed in neutral tones, no jewelry, no makeup, just clean lines and quiet armor. The mediation center sat between a dental office and a tax prep building, just another place people come to clean up messes. I arrived early. The receptionist offered a smile too wide, too forced. I nodded politely and took the seat closest to the far end of the conference table. The room was cool, sterile. 4 plain chairs, a pitcher of water, a small tray of wrapped peppermints. A wall clock ticked louder than it should have. I opened the folder and laid the documents out in front of me. Originals, notarized. The fake power of attorney Everett had faxed from someone's back office. The reworded will Valora had updated with Jasper's forged signature. And the property transfer they'd filed while I was out of state, still mourning the death of the only person in that family who'd ever told me I mattered. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Just done. A light knock broke the silence. Valora stepped in first. Her lipstick was uneven. Her posture wilted. She used to float into rooms. Today she looked like she'd been dragged. Everett followed, slower than usual. His tie was crooked, the gray in his beard more pronounced. Neither of them made eye contact. Jasper entered last. He didn't sit. Just stood near the door, eyes down. The mediator arrived shortly after. Neutral suit, neutral tone, neutral face. Thank you all for coming, she began, laying out a simple stack of forms. Today's meeting is private, binding. It is not about feelings. It is about resolution. I looked up. No one said a word. I slid the folder forward and opened it to the top sheet. This is my offer, I said. Valora stiffened, as if bracing for something sharp. I will not pursue criminal charges, I said slowly, if the full amount of $160,000 is repaid within 60 days, and you both sign this affidavit, relinquishing any claim to my property, inheritance, or legal name. Everett let out a sound like a laugh that got lost halfway through. Valora's voice cracked. We raised you. We don't deserve this. I met her eyes. You didn't raise me. You raised something you could shape, control, mold into a tribute to yourselves. You broke that when I started thinking for myself. She flinched, but said nothing. From the corner of the room, Jasper finally spoke, quiet, uncertain. I didn't know it went this far. I was stupid. I looked at him without warmth. You weren't stupid. You were comfortable. That's different. He hesitated. They told me you walked away, abandoned us. I walked, I said, my voice even. But not away. I walked to survive. There's a difference. The mediator raised a hand gently. We'll take a short recess. 10 minutes. Everyone stood at once, as if the air had gotten heavier. I stayed in my chair. Everett lingered near the window, then crossed to me slowly. I know I failed you. I didn't move. I wanted to be better, he said, voice low. But your mother, she made things. I stopped him with a slight shake of my head. No, don't hand me that. You had chances. You chose silence. That was your weapon. He looked down. I thought I was protecting peace. There was no peace, I said. Only performance. The 10 minutes ended quietly. We returned to the table. The mediator passed around the agreement. Valora's hand trembled as she signed. Everett's face was blank. Jasper didn't ask to sign. He knew he didn't belong in the final act. When the papers were done, I collected my copy and closed the folder. No fanfare, no last words, until I stood. This isn't closure, I said. It's just me stepping out of the wreckage. I walked past them toward the door. Valora reached out. Her fingers brushed mine, soft, ghost-like. I pulled back gently. This is where our business ends. And I left the room. I didn't look back when I closed the conference room door. Not once. The soft click behind me felt final, like the last nail in a box I'd been carrying too long. Outside, the sky had slipped into that tender shade between dusk and night. The kind of blue that always made me think of porch swings and old quilts. I drove home without turning on the radio, just the sound of tires on pavement and the faint hum of everything that had gone unsaid. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the porch light had flicked on, casting a warm circle over the steps. My heels hit the wooden boards softly as I stepped inside. I didn't bother with the kitchen or the lights. Just walked to the living room and sat on the old velvet chair near the window, the one Grandpa used to nap in when he visited. For a while, I just sat. The room around me was still, peaceful even. That was new. On the side table beside me was the cedar box I hadn't touched since the funeral. Inside were old family photos, the notarized addendum to the will, and one sealed envelope. Thick paper, handwriting I'd know anywhere. I'd seen it on fishing tackle boxes, lunch notes, birthday cards with $5 bills tucked inside. Grandpa had left me one last letter, and until now I hadn't been ready to open it. My fingers hovered over the flap before I finally broke the seal. The paper inside was slightly yellowed, the ink faded in spots, but every word was clear. If you're reading this, it means you stayed true to who you are. Just that one line, and I was already holding my breath. I wish I could have said more when I was alive, but truth is, I didn't always know how to. You reminded me of your grandma that way, quiet but steady, the kind that folks overlook until the storm hits. And suddenly, you're the only one standing. I blinked hard. My throat tightened, but I kept reading. I know what they did. I know how they twisted the papers. I saw it coming. And I'm sorry I didn't speak louder when I should have. But I want you to know this. I chose you. Not because you asked, but because you didn't. You were there. When I was in the hospital, when I forgot things, you showed up, quiet, like always. But I noticed. I could feel it now, tears prickling, but not falling. Just the swell behind the eyes, the kind of ache you don't scream about, the kind you carry. The letter continued. Sometimes the ones who look away the longest are the ones who love you the most. They just never learned how to say it. I wish I'd learned sooner. I saw what Valora was becoming, and what Everett let happen. I couldn't fix them, but I could make sure you were protected. That's why the second clause exists. He meant the addendum. The one that made everything legal, the one they hadn't counted on. They'll say you owe them. They'll drag your name through the dirt and call it love. But don't let them shrink your worth down to what they think they gave you. You don't owe them anything but the truth, and maybe that's the hardest gift of all. By now, I was holding the letter with both hands, careful not to let it tremble. I want you to live, Riley, not just survive. You've done that long enough. I hope you build something quiet and real, the kind of life you don't have to prove to anybody. And if someday you need to tell your story, tell it in your own voice. That's the one that matters. The final line was simple. I'm proud of you. I always was. I sat there a long time after that. Not crying, just breathing, letting the words settle like dust on old hardwood. No fireworks, no dramatic music, just peace. Eventually, I folded the letter back along its creases, soft as silk. I opened the cedar box and placed it beside the addendum, then tucked in the old fishing photo where Grandpa's arm was around my shoulder, my 10-year-old grin missing a tooth. I added the copy of the court agreement too, not out of bitterness, but to remind myself where the road had led. That chapter, I decided, could close now. I stood up and walked barefoot to the porch. The night air was cool, the kind that touches your skin like breath. The land stretched out before me, quiet and steady, mine now, but it had always been more than that. It was where I was seen. As I leaned on the railing, my phone buzzed gently in the pocket of my cardigan. I pulled it out, expecting spam or a missed call, but the message read, "Hi. I read what happened. I'm your cousin Elise. I think we need to talk about what they did to our side of the family." I stared at the screen, the porch light glowing softly around me. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone. The sun had long dipped behind the hills by the time I stepped into the quiet little coffee shop tucked off a side road in Lockhart. The windows were steamed just slightly, catching the amber light of the hanging bulbs inside. I pulled the door gently, the bell overhead giving a soft chime as I stepped in. She was already there. Elise sat at the corner table, small frame, chestnut hair pulled back, hands resting tensely on a folder. Manila, just like mine had been. Her eyes met mine, uncertain at first, but there was something familiar in them, a shadow of someone we both once knew. "Riley?" She stood. I nodded. "You must be Elise." We sat across from one another, the hum of the espresso machine a soft background to the quiet unfolding between us. "I almost didn't reach out," she admitted, fingers grazing the edge of her folder. "I've read everything that's happened. And part of me thought, maybe you wouldn't want to know what they did to us." I leaned forward, voice calm. "After what they did to me, I'd be a fool not to listen." She let out a breath that sounded like she'd been holding it for decades. "My mother, her name was Cora, your grandfather's youngest, from his first marriage. They were close. But then, something happened. Valora told people she was unstable, that she made things up. My mother was 17 when she left Texas. She never went back." I listened, heart steady. The name Cora stirred something in the back of my memory, like the faint scent of honeysuckle on a summer breeze. Grandpa had once mentioned a little sister who moved west. I'd thought he meant his sister, not his daughter. Elise opened the folder slowly. Inside were handwritten letters aged with time. One caught my eye instantly, Grandpa's familiar slanted cursive. "I kept them hidden," she said softly. "They're from him. Some dated back nearly 25 years. She handed one to me. I unfolded it carefully, as though it might vanish if I blinked. "Dear Cora," it began. "I still think about that 4th of July when you burned the chicken and tried to blame it on the grill. You never did like admitting you were wrong, but God, I loved you for it. I wish you were here now. Things ain't the same. Valora's changed. I can't see straight through the fog she's built around this house." There was another photo tucked into the stack, a young woman laughing, holding a toddler, Elise maybe, by the ocean. Grandpa stood beside her, the sun washed over his face. "That was the last time we saw him," Elise murmured. "We were told to stay away, that he was sick, dangerous, that if we came back, there'd be consequences." I took out the addendum Grandpa left me, placed it beside her folder. 2 timelines, same signatures, same slant in the pen strokes. They weren't just hiding money, I whispered. They were hiding people. Elise nodded. Whole branches of the family tree just clipped off. And Grandpa? I asked. Did he ever say why he didn't fight harder? She looked down. He said he tried, that Valora made him choose peace over war, that he stayed quiet so he could at least stay close to the land, but he always planned something for you. He told me once, Riley sees me. Even when I forget who I am, she sees me. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. Instead, I opened the folder again, folded the letter gently, and asked, Would you be okay if we rebuilt this? Not just the inheritance, the memory, the part they thought would stay buried? Elise nodded slowly. More than okay. I think it's time. Later that evening, I drove out to the family cemetery. The gravel crunched under my tires. The wind had picked up just enough to lift the corners of the scarf I'd tied around my neck. I stood by Grandpa's stone, weathered, simple. I brushed away a leaf that had landed across his name. I found her, I said, voice quiet. I found the ones you thought were lost. No thunder rolled, no flash of light, just silence, honest, weighty, steady. Back home, I didn't turn the lights on right away. I sat on the porch with my boots still on, the day catching up with me in waves. Then I reached for a pen, not to write to Valora, not to Romy, not to anyone who had tried to dim me. I wrote to myself, You don't owe them peace for the wars they started. You don't owe them understanding when they spent years gaslighting you out of your own history. There is no invoice for love, no refund on betrayal, but there is something better, freedom in clarity. I folded the letter, slid it into the memory box beside Grandpa's, right between his final note and a worn Polaroid of us fishing when I was 7. A child's voice called from outside the gate. I looked up, a little boy riding past on his bike, waving. I lifted my hand and waved back. They tried to make me believe I owed them for the life they gave me, but I didn't, because in the end, I gave that life meaning, without them.